Members and alternates have returned to Department 1, so we're back in session. People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is here, Mr. DeGuerin at his side, Mr. Henderson, and all of the other prosecutors are present. And you may resume the videotaped testimony of Mr. Harney.
Thank you, Your Honor. Resuming 56 minutes and 56 seconds.
So basically, whatever training you received in the academy was it in terms of homicides?
Yes, and there may have been an in-service training. Troopers are required to attend in-service training, every few years. So there might have been some in-service training after that.
As part of your duties in February of 1982, did you become involved in a missing persons investigation involving a woman named Kathleen Durst?
Yes, I was.
And during that investigation, at that point in time, did you have contact with a man named Robert Durst?
Yes, I did.
Do you recognize him today?
Well, it appears to me from what I've seen in the newspapers, and it appears to be this gentleman with the headphones in the sitting next to the defense counsel.
It's referring to Mr. Durst.
All right.
Mr. Durst.
And you recognizing him today, are you saying it's based on seeing him in the media subsequent to that date as opposed to recognizing him from back 30 years ago?
I'm saying I recognize him based on the media today.
Okay. But do you have a recollection of having contact with an individual, a man named Robert Durst back then?
Yes.
Were you familiar with the name Robert Durst before you became involved in that investigation?
I don't believe I was.
Had you ever met him before you became involved in that investigation?
I don't believe so.
Had you ever met or had contact with Kathie Durst or Kathleen Durst prior to your involvement in that investigation?
I don't believe so.
Are you familiar with the term blotter? A blotter, B-L-O-T-T-E.
Yes.
What's a blotter?
A blotter is where state troopers and investigators and supervisors record their daily activity.
Okay. And how is it done? Is it done chronologically or separate by case? How is it treated?
It's done chronologically.
All right. And does each trooper have their own blotter, or is there one blotter for each station or substation?
Yes, there's one blotter per station.
And how do entries make their way into the blotter? Describe that process.
As an example, a person calls for police services. The trooper on the desk will take the call. He'll record in the blotter that so-and-so called, requesting a trooper to respond for assistance. The desk man will note that, and then he'll make a notation. Trooper, my case maybe, Trooper Harney assigned, radio 9054, which would be the car number.
Okay. And let's assume Trooper Harney was assigned, and you went out and did some form of investigation. Eventually, when you come back to the station or substation?
Yes.
And when you got back to the station or substation, would you make a record in that blotter of what you had just done?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Based on your training and your experience, do entries make their way into this blotter close in time to when the events actually occur?
That's correct.
And is this blotter maintained by each station in the normal course of the business operations of that station?
Yes.
I have a 12-page document here. I'm going to mark this as People's 51, I believe it is.
Yes.
May I first, please?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you People's 51 if you could. Sir.
Sorry.
You may proceed. Thank you. If you could please review People's 51. Let me know when you're done.
I do.
Have you seen it previously?
Yes, I have.
Describe for the court, what does that have?
These are sort of blotter entries assigning troopers to a complaint. They're results of maybe the preliminary results of their investigation, their recorded activity for the day.
Okay, and is this for which barracks?
I'm sorry?
Which barracks?
So these documents reflect entries at the State Police Somers Barracks and at the State Police Lewisboro Station.
Okay. On some pages, there are portions that are blocked out or redacted.
Yes.
What is redacted?
What is redacted is other complaints not associated with this case.
So in other words, the blotter is maintained for the barracks as a whole, and various troopers place entries on the same blotter.
That's correct.
And various entries in the blotter will refer to different investigations that are going on at the same time.
That's correct.
People's 51 reflects the entries that were made with respect to a certain investigation and not others. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. The names Trooper Luskowski and Boylan and Otto are referenced in that blotter. Do you recognize those names?
I do.
Who are those people?
Trooper Luskowski was a state trooper assigned to the Somers Barracks. Trooper Boylan was a state trooper assigned to the Somers Barracks. And Trooper Otto was a state trooper assigned to the Brewster Barracks.
And the blotter entries in People's 51 are those for events that took place in February of 1982?
Yes.
All right. And after reviewing them previous to today, do they appear to accurately document investigations that were performed based on the normal operations of the barracks?
Yes, they do.
All right.
Trooper Harney, obviously what you've been shown as People's 51 is a photostatic copy of the original document, correct?
That's correct.
And is the original document some sort of bound book with numbered pages in it?
Yes.
Where is that original document now, if you know?
Once a blotter is full, so say all 200 pages of the blotter are full, that blotter will be kept. Don't hold me to the timeline, but they be kept at the station for a period of time, and a new blotter will be activated. Then that blotter goes to troop headquarters. The one that's completed will go to troop headquarters. I believe it was for 5 years. It will be held at troop headquarters for a 5-year period. After that, that blotter goes to division headquarters, which was in Albany, and that blotter, I believe, is held for 25 years.
All right, so the original from which these copies have been made is still in existence?
I'm not sure at this point it is, sir.
All right. What we've been shown as People's Exhibit 51 is numbered in the upper right-hand corner. It has page numbers in it. The last one visible starts with page 133 and goes through 167, but there are other pages after that. If we were to see the original, well, is the original, let me ask it this way, is the original after 25 years, is it put on microfilm or microfiche or somehow recorded and stored that way, or is it destroyed?
I don't believe it's, my understanding is it's destroyed after that time.
Okay, you know,
Because there would be hundreds of these blotters from around the state.
when were these copies?
These documents here, sir?
Yes, sir.
I made them, I believe, in 1982.
1982.
Yes.
And supplied them to whom?
I had them in my possession, and the PCI also had them.
What?
The PCI, Bureau of Criminal Investigation, they would have had them.
All right, so do you know where the ones that have been tendered for introduction here, where they came from? In other words, People's Exhibit number 51 that you've been tendered, where did those exact copies come from?
Well, they originated with me. I made copies.
So you kept them in your personal possession?
Well, no, I did have copies in my possession. I believe the originals were turned over to investigator Joseph Becerra in 2000.
You said the originals. Do you mean copies?
I'm sorry, the copies that I made were turned over to him.
Okay. So, for instance, if we wanted to compare these copies to the original, that is the bound book that you called blotter, we couldn't do that anymore, is that right?
I don't believe you can. I don't think that the original blotters are still available.
And do you know whether there's any complete copy of that particular blotter, such as microfilm, microfiche, any sort of electronic photographic copy of those still in existence?
I don't believe there is.
We continue. Agreement with the court. I just have a couple follow-up questions based on.
Yes, you may continue with your examination of the witness.
So, at some point, you made copies from the blotter in 1982,
Yes,
and you kept copies in your possession.
that's correct.
So you actually went to the book and took copies from the actual book.
I made copies from the blotter.
Okay. And were you able to compare 51 against the copies that you maintained in your possession?
Yes,
And is People's 51 a true and accurate, exact copy of the pages that you took directly from the book in 1982?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Cross-examination?
No,
Oh, okay.
I have a couple more areas.
No, thanks, but okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right, so on February 5th, 1982, when you were working as a trooper in Lewisboro, did you become aware that a woman named Gilberta Najami had contacted the Somers Barracks to report her friend Kathleen Durst missing, who lived on White Street in South Salem?
Yes.
All right. What time, based on your review of the blotter, did that call come in on February 5th from Mr. Najami?
If I could refer to the blotter entry.
Sorry, yes.
So Gilberta Najami called State Police Somers on February 5th, 1982 at 1 p.m.
And was someone assigned to follow up on that initially?
Yes, Trooper Lukowski was assigned.
Good. What, if anything, happened next?
Trooper Lukowski responded to the residents on Boyd Street, and after being assigned to the call, and at the conclusion of his workday, he made a blotter entry.
Did he continue the investigation, or did it somehow get transferred to you at that point?
He went off duty, and thereafter it was assigned to me.
Okay, so it was assigned to you on February 5th, 1982,
Yes.
at approximately what time?
In the evening, I received a call that Mr. Schrock was with the NYPD, and Mr. Durst, when he responded from New York City, he called the State Police Somers Barracks at 10:10 p.m., requesting patrol meet him at his residence.
Okay. What time were you assigned to start working with him?
My shift on that day would have been 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay. And when you came on shift, at some point before you began your investigation, did you receive information about what had been reported by Ms. Najami?
Yes, I believe I did.
What information did you receive that you were following up on?
Well, there was a document created by investigator Trooper Otto, which was forwarded to Trooper Boylan at the State Police Somers Barracks.
Okay. And just in general, based on your memory, what information were you working on when you began your investigation?
The call involved, Mr. Najami's call involved a concern for her friend, Kathleen Durst, and her whereabouts.
Okay. And did she indicate for how long approximately she'd been not seen?
The information received was that she last saw her on January 31st, 1982.
So did you yourself personally conduct some follow-up investigation on that call from Ms. Najami on February 5th?
Yes, I did.
And that would be during your shift, which started at 3 p.m.?
Yes.
All right. Did you, as part of your investigation, speak with anyone at Jacoby Hospital in New York City?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And as you sit here today, do you have a full memory of exactly what information you received when you conducted that call?
Well, I rely on my notes taken at the time, but I did have a conversation with the doctor at Jacoby Hospital.
Okay. I guess what I'm asking you is, today, would you have a sufficient memory to fully and accurately relay all those details about what was said to you?
I have to rely on my notes taken at the time.
Okay. Would this be true of all of the investigation that you had done that day?
I would say it's 35 years later. My notes are the most accurate description of what occurred.
Okay. And did you write a report of some sort that particular day or the next day on February 6th?
Yes, my shift would have ended at 11 p.m. When I completed interviews at the Durst residence. I went back to the station and I typed a document with my findings up to that point.
Okay. Let's talk about what you did. Other than speaking with someone at Jacoby Hospital, did you speak with Kathleen Durst, divorce lawyer?
Yes.
Okay. Did you speak with Kathleen Durst's family members?
Yes.
Did you speak with Robert Durst himself?
Yes.
All right. While you were speaking with these individuals, were you taking notes?
Yes.
And when you got back to the barracks, did you use those notes and use them to create a report?
Yes.
And when you made this report, were the events still fresh in your mind?
They were.
And did you, as best you could, honestly and accurately document everything that occurred that day in this report?
I documented my actions which occurred that day.
And you did so honestly and accurately as best you could?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have a 3-page report in emergence of People 52.
Yeah.
I'm showing you what is marked as People's 52. I just want you to see generally if you recognize this report.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is this the report that you had made on that particular day?
This is page 1 of that document.
Okay, looking at page 2 of People's 52, is that page 2 of this document?
Yes, sir.
And looking at page 3 of this report, is that page 3 of this document?
Yes.
Appear to be a complete copy of that particular report.
It does.
All right. So, when you spoke, first start off with the doctor at Jacoby Hospital, you documented that conversation in this report?
I did.
Okay, Prosecutor?
Yes.
I'd ask you to, so if you could please read verbatim into the record the paragraph relating to your interview with the doctor at Jacoby Hospital and start from the beginning to the end, word for word.
On 2/5/82, Dr. Leslie Hain, Jacoby Hospital, Bronx, New York, 212-430-5000, stated that Mrs. Durst was treated for abrasions to the face, possible assault by Mr. Durst. She was treated and released. Incident occurred about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Medical record number 166-1136. No police action taken on this. Apparently not reported.
So that last
7 p.m.
Sorry. That last sentence starting with no police action taken on this, is that something that she told you or is that your own reflection, your own mental impression?
My impression, this was based on a conversation with her at that time.
Okay. All right, so that's something she would have told you.
I believe so.
Okay. Did you speak with, as part of your investigation on February 5th, any of Kathleen Durst's family members?
I did.
And as you sit here today, do you have a sufficient independent memory to accurately relay all the details of what he told you?
They were brief conversations. I spoke to her brother and her sister.
So, please listen to my question. I'm not asking you right now to read into the record what they said. I'm asking you, without reading into the record from your report, would you have a sufficient independent memory today to accurately relay those details to the court, or would you have to read your report?
My preference would be to read my notes from the time.
And would that be the accurate version of what was said?
That's the most accurate version.
Okay. So, if you could please relate by reading into the record the paragraph dealing with the interviews with the family members.
Interviewed Jim McCormack, brother of Mrs. Durst. Would you like me to include the telephone numbers?
Yes.
Telephone number 516-368-4814 in Long Island. And Mary Hughes, sister of Mrs. Durst, 212-755-6973. Neither have heard from their sister and say that this is unusual. They are concerned. Jim McCormack says that the husband-wife relationship is deteriorating.
Okay. Now, you included a phone number. Those would be the phone numbers that you contacted them.
Yes.
And as you sit here today, would you have an independent memory of what number you called, or would you have to rely on what you previously wrote to have the accurate, freshest version of that?
I would need to review the document.
Okay. So, on February 5th, 1982, as part of your investigation, at approximately 10:10 p.m., you get a call from someone. You can refer to your blotter entry to refresh your recollection if you need to.
I received a call from Mr. Robert Durst.
Okay. Where were you when you received this call?
I was at the State Police Somers Barracks.
What did Robert Durst want?
He asked that the patrol meet him at his residence
His residence where?
on Boyd Street in South Salem.
Okay. Did you eventually go out there and meet him?
Yes.
And you went out to his South Salem home on White Street in South Salem?
Yes.
And did you go alone or did you go with someone?
I went with Trooper Dennis's.
What time was it that you approximately arrived at his home?
If I may relay on the document,
Sure.
the blotter entry. We arrived at his residence at approximately 11:40 p.m.
That would be on February 5th?
February 5th, 1982.
All right. When you arrived there, was he there?
Yes, he was.
Do you have a recollection of actually interviewing Robert Durst at his residence in South Salem?
I do.
You remember that?
I do.
Okay. Do you remember meeting with him?
Yes.
Where did you interview him?
In his residence.
Okay. Did he invite you inside?
He called us.
Okay. What, from your own memory today, do you remember that he told you?
I'm sorry?
Well, let me just ask this. Do you have a full and complete enough memory to accurately relay to us everything he told you during that interview, or would you have to rely on your report?
I would prefer to rely on what I wrote at the time.
Would that be the most full and accurate version of what transpired?
It would.
So, if you could please read into the record from your report what Robert Durst told you on February 5th, 1982, when you went out to his home in South Salem on White Street.
I reference blotter entries 1359, 1374, 1375 of 2582. Robert Durst, White Street, South Salem, 7635022, states that he dropped his wife off at the Katona train station on 13182 to catch the 9:18 p.m. train to New York City. He states that he saw her get on the train and that he saw the train pull out. She had no luggage with her. He states that he talked to her at their Riverside Drive, New York City residence, 212-877-3413, for about a minute at approximately 11:30 p.m.
Hold on, I just want to clarify.
Sure.
Before you testified today, did you confer with me, and we highlighted portions that came directly from Mr. Durst's report versus information you got from other sources?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you go on and please read the highlighted portions in the rest of this report.
Mr. Durst was asked during the interview at his residence about his wife having been treated at Jacoby Hospital emergency room. He denied any knowledge of the incident and was surprised that she did not contact the family physician. During the interview with Mr. Durst, he stated that neither he nor his wife had been at the South Salem house during the month of January. It is not used that often during the winter. Says his wife is a boozer and will use coke. She has $5,000 in checking a chemical bank at 1501 Broadway, New York City, and a security account at Lehman Brothers, New York City, in parentheses, Alan Khan, with $20,000 plus in stocks. She has very little cash on her and no major credit cards, has department store credit cards. Mr. Durst states that his wife went to her attorney during June 1980 for an agreement separation of property. He says it is a 25-page contract between the two.
The information that Mr. Durst told you about Kathie, about taking Kathie to the Katona train station on January 31st, 1982 to catch the 92 train, and seeing her get on the train and seeing the train pull out, is that information that would have been important to you in your investigation?
Yes, it was.
How so?
It would be necessary when I created a File 6 missing person report, a teletype message, it would be important in that regard.
And would you have been careful, because it was important to you to make sure you accurately wrote in your report everything Mr. Durst told you?
Yes, it would be.
What was Mr. Durst's demeanor as he was describing to you the circumstances of his wife's disappearance? Describe the court best you can what his demeanor was.
I would say his demeanor, comportment was unagitated when we started. His demeanor changed somewhat when we addressed the questions of her being, treated at Jacoby Hospital.
All right. Well, you said he was unagitated. Describe what you mean by that. What was it about what you observed that makes you think he was unagitated? What words would you use to describe it?
Unagitated. He was. I would say he was not excited, but that changed when we approached this particular question.
Which particular question was it?
May I refer to the document?
Yes.
So it was regarding when I asked him about his wife having been treated at Jacoby Hospital emergency room and when he denied any incident of the knowledge.
Okay. So when you asked him that, how, if at all, did his demeanor change? What did you notice?
I would say it changed somewhat from unagitated to agitated.
What do you mean by that?
He just was more concerned. My impression was he was concerned that we knew about this incident, this reported incident.
Based on your training, your background and experience in 30 years, you've been a peace officer. The demeanor that Mr. Durst had as he was relating to details to assist you in helping find Susan wife, did they seem consistent with what you would have expected?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Did his demeanor seem consistent with what you would have expected? And if not, how so?
Well, Mr. Durst was not the first person to report his wife missing.
Okay.
more people in the circle were more concerned about Kathleen Durst. That's my impression.
Is that your impression of him based on how he was acting and what his demeanor was while he was talking?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to refer you to February 7th, 1982. Did you take a report from someone named Doug Durst?
May I refer to the lottery entries?
Yes.
I did.
Okay. If you could please read into the record what Doug Durst told you on that particular day.
Would you like the original call or just my response?
Your response based on you speaking with Doug Durst. Okay, that's maybe the most accurate, honest, truthful version of what happened, reading the letter street, is that correct?
That's correct. This is lottery entry 035. I'm sorry.
Is this your writing?
It is.
So this is something you wrote?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
This is from the SP Lewisboro, State Police Lewisboro blotter. Lottery entry 035 at 11 p.m. on Sunday, February 7th. 11 p.m. Trooper Harney at station from Patrol Post 30. A. Lottery entry 1443, Doug Durst, North Salem Road, Katona, New York. Calls read possible burglary at the Robert Durst residence, in parentheses, brother. Hoyt Street, South Salem. Rear window of residence was broken with a rock. No entry to residence apparent. Owner to contact SP Somers upon his return from New York City if anything is missing. Interview with neighbors Robert Holmes and Malcolm Downey with negative results. Window secured by Doug Durst. Closed. And there's Free Lewisboro, lottery entry 032033, continued missing person investigation.
Okay. When you went on February 5th to Robert Durst's home in South Salem to interview him, you said you entered the house. Did you look around the house? Did you look around the inside of the house when you went inside?
As any trooper would, we looked around.
Okay. Did you notice any obvious signs of halted?
I did not.
Did you look into every room in the house?
I don't believe we did.
In other words, when you went into the bedroom?
I don't know if we did. If he took us into the bedroom, I don't believe so.
Have you gone into the basement?
I don't believe we did.
Did you look in drawers?
I don't believe we did.
Did you examine the knives in the home?
I don't believe we did.
Did you look underneath the home?
I don't believe we did.
Did you look in the attic spaces in the home if there were any?
I don't believe we did.
Did you execute a search warrant at the house?
I don't believe, well, we did not.
Okay. Well, are you aware, as you sit here today, of anyone who executed a search warrant at that home?
I don't know if a court ordered search warrant
In 1982?
in 1982 at that time. No, I do not believe so.
Okay. Did you do any chemical or forensic tests inside the home to search for blood?
It's not something troopers would do, but I don't believe that occurred at that time.
Okay. Would you say, as you sit here today, you really did any kind of an actual investigative search of the interior of that home?
Not an investigative search.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Trooper Harney, I believe I heard you correctly say that Mr. Robert Durst, Bob Durst, is the person that called you, or called the trooper and invited him to his house. Is that right?
Yes,
Was he considered a suspect at the time?
I would say no.
Was he considered a person of interest in the disappearance of his wife?
Your Honor, I would assume these questions are only asking whether or not this witness considered him a suspect.
Yes, understood that way. Go ahead. Do you understand it that way?
I'm sorry.
You did the question that way.
Okay.
You may answer it that way.
Did I consider him to be a person of interest?
Yeah.
I considered, that's kind of new terminology, person of interest, but it wasn't a term used in my day, but certainly he was somebody that had information regarding Kathleen Durst's whereabouts and somebody that needed to be interviewed.
You already had some information from a friend. Gilberta Najami was the original person that had called the police, correct?
That's correct.
And Gilberta Najami was very suspicious about whether Mr. Durst was involved in the disappearance of his wife. That's a fair statement, isn't it?
I'd say that's a fair statement.
Okay, so you were aware at some point that Mr. Durst had been interviewed during the day of February the 5th by Detective Trpr in New York, correct?
Yes.
Right. So, wasn't it a little unusual for the person that at least Gilberta Najami suspected of the involvement in the disappearance of his wife to call you and invite you out to the house?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
Wasn't it a little unusual that Mr. Durst, who was the person suspected at least by Gilberta Najami, to call you and invite you out to his house?
Well, I want to separate what I'm doing from what she's telling me. I want to draw my own conclusion.
Sure. But clearly what Gilberta Najami was telling you was that she suspected foul play, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's before Mr. Durst calls you and invites you to come to the house.
Yes.
You didn't have enough for a search warrant at that time, did you?
I would say probably at that time, I would certainly want to coordinate something like that with our Bureau of Criminal Investigation.
Okay, well that kind of answered my question, but really my question is, you didn't have enough probable cause to go in and apply for a search warrant for his house at that point, did you?
I would say we were just conducting interviews at this point. This was happening pretty quick, and I would say I'm not at that point yet to make that determination.
Okay, and that's a yes. You did not have enough to ask for a search warrant, right?
If you want to call it a yes, that's fine.
Well, I'm asking you. You were the investigator,
Right.
and you knew right then that you didn't have enough to go to a judge and say, I want a search warrant for Mr. Durst's house.
I'm not sure that was in my mindset at that point.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to ask you, sir, is this missing person investigation falls in your lap. You have some information that a close friend of the missing person believes that the husband did it. And all of a sudden the husband calls you up and says, come on out to the house. That's the situation that you found yourself in, right?
Yes.
And so, when you went out to the house, you naturally, being an investigator and being suspicious by professional nature, you looked around as much as you could, didn't you?
I'd say we made observations.
In fact, you even made notes of your observations that you saw nothing out of the ordinary, right?
I think that was a conclusion.
Your conclusion from looking around was you saw nothing out of the ordinary.
I'd say that's a fair statement.
Okay. And Mr. Durst did not stop you from going any place in the house, did he?
I don't recall an objection by him.
Any objection by him, right?
I don't recall.
Right. So in other words, he didn't quickly close the door to the bedroom and keep you from going in there, did he?
I don't believe that was the case.
He didn't stop you from going up into the attic, did he? He didn't say, wait, you can't go up in the attic.
I don't believe that was the case.
And he didn't say, now you can't look in the drawers for my knives, did he?
I don't know if we had that conversation.
Well, you were asked on direct examination by the prosecutor if you were able to examine the knives in the knife drawer, I think is the way it went.
Yes.
But at any rate, Mr. Durst didn't stop you from doing anything, did he?
No, our purpose was there to interview him regarding his missing wife.
And he answered all your questions.
I say he answered the questions.
Was there not a single question that you asked him that he refused to answer?
I don't know about that. Yeah, probably not.
If he had refused to answer some question, you would have made a note of it.
I probably would have, yes.
Okay. And you didn't make such a note, right?
I don't believe regarding that question.
Well, you read your notes, you read the blotter, you read the report, and there's nowhere in there where you say that he refused to answer any question.
That's correct.
And he didn't say, wait a minute, I've got a lawyer, I better talk to my lawyer first. Did he?
I don't believe he said that.
Now, you mentioned that you thought that he seemed unagitated when you were asking him questions until you asked him about the hospital, right?
Yes.
You were aware, weren't you, that he had already been through several hours of interview with Detective Struck in Manhattan?
I'm aware he was with Detective Struck. I don't know what the duration was.
Okay, but you do know that he had already reported it to Detective Struck?
Yes.
And you do know that he had interviewed with Detective Struck?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And what is your recollection, if you have any, or why Mr. Durst said he was calling you, I don't mean you personally, but the state troopers in the area where he had his home in South Salem?
I'm surmising that the NYPD said,
Okay, I didn't ask you what you, go ahead and tell us what you surmised, but I'm asking you really, did he tell you why he was calling?
well, he's calling to report his wife missing.
Okay, but why he was calling you after having talked to Detective Struck for whatever period of time he did? What did he say, if anything, to you about why he was calling?
He's calling to report his wife missing.
All right. But my question was why he was calling you, meaning the state police, after he'd already been struck. Did he say anything about that?
He might have, but my impression, my understanding is the NYPD referred him back to us because Katona, New York, at that time, was the last place she was seen.
Now that's your surmise, you say?
Well, the investigation at the time, he indicated he put her on the train on the evening of the 31st, and he last saw her pulling out of the Katona train station in Westchester County, which was within our patrol area.
Agreed, but my question was not that. My question was, first, did he tell you why he was reporting it also to you when he'd already reported it to Detective Struck?
I don't know if he told us, but my belief, my understanding is he was referred to the state police to report his wife missing.
Okay, now that gives us another step further. You don't remember him saying anything about it, but you believe that he may have been told to call you also. Is that fair restatement?
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. Upon what do you base that belief? Is it something Struck told you? Is it somebody else told you other than Mr. Durst? Or you just surmising?
It could have been what Detective Struck told me. By this point, I had already originated a File 6, what we call a File 6 teletype message, missing person report. That's all points bulletin. And I think a determination was made. She was last seen at that point in Westchester County.
Now, let's talk about your stating that Mr. Durst seemed less agitated when you were talking to him than after you told him about the hospital. You had never met Mr. Durst before, is that right?
I don't believe so.
You never saw him after that, did you? Did you ever interview him or see him after that?
I don't believe so.
Did you know anything about his personality?
Prior? No.
No. At the time that you saw him, the time that you interviewed him, when you came out to his house at his invitation and interviewed him in his house, you didn't have any real basis to judge how he would react to some of them, did you?
No.
And people, you know from interviewing thousands of people in your career, people react differently, don't they?
Did you?
Some people show more emotion than others. That's true, isn't it?
That's true.
And you don't know whether Mr. Durst was a person that by nature did or did not show emotion, do you?
I don't know that.
Let's talk about Douglas Durst, Mr. Durst's brother. The state police got a call from him that he thought there was a burglary at his brother's house, at Robert Durst's house, right?
Yes. I'm not sure it says burglary, if I can refer to the document.
Break in.
Yes, there was damage to the house.
That's after you'd been out there to talk to Mr. Durst.
Yes.
At some point, you learned that Johnny had burglarized Mr. Durst's house, didn't you?
I object to the term burglarized.
Okay, broken in.
I'm not sure where I heard that over the years.
Well, you investigated to some extent the broken window at Mr. Durst's house, didn't you?
Yes.
And sure enough, there was a broken window there, right?
Yes.
Could you tell whether anything had been taken?
I think a determination was made that nothing was taken at that point.
Who made that
At
determination?
that point. I think I, along with Doug Durst.
Okay. But then when you heard later that Gilberta and Johnny had broken in, did that explain the broken window to you?
First, I have no direct knowledge of her breaking in, so-called breaking in. I don't know if she's the person that broke the window.
Well, just put two and two together. I know you don't have direct knowledge that you'd have to be standing there watching her breaking in to have direct knowledge, but you learned reliably, didn't you, that she had broken in?
Yes, but I won't say yes, but I don't know if that's the way she went in, if she went in, you know, other than I'm not involved in that aspect of the investigation.
Did you interview Gilberta and Johnny personally? In other words, face to face?
I'm sorry?
In other words, face to face. Did you interview her at some point, face to face?
I don't know if I did. I think I met her at one point. I don't know if it was if I conducted an interview.
You don't remember? You just don't know or don't remember?
Well, she initiated the missing person complaint, and that information was provided over the telephone.
Did you talk to her over the telephone?
I did.
And she was very emotional, wasn't she?
She was very concerned.
Was she emotional?
I can't answer that.
Is that because you weren't in her presence, physical presence, to see her, that you can't comment on that?
I say over the telephone, it's hard to determine the emotion. Sometimes.
Okay. Now, you also interviewed a Michael Burns, didn't you?
On the telephone.
All right. And that was a person who was well acquainted with Kathleen Durst.
I believe he was a social friend.
In fact, you quote her in your report as saying to you, quote, "You don't know her as well as I do. Stop worrying about her. She's had enough." That's a direct quote from him.
Yes, if I could just refer to that, please.
Please. Page 2. Middle of the page.
So that's a statement that
It's on the screen in front of you, if that will help you, what I'm referring to.
if I can read it,
Sure.
the progressive step. That's a statement that he made apparently to this McInerney.
All right, I stand corrected. He didn't make that directly to you.
I believe he may have reiterated that to me when I spoke with him.
Okay, so both to Geraldine McInerney, that's McInerney, and to you, Mr. Burns, said something to the effect, "You don't know her as well as I do. Stop worrying about her. She's had enough."
Yeah, he definitely, from my report here, he definitely makes that statement to Ms. McInerney. Whether he reiterated that, he may have to me.
All right, we'll leave this session to one thing. This is order for you. And you should not discuss your testimony with any other witness. Should you not discuss your testimony with any other witness? All right, we are back in session. People versus Durst. Mr. Durst is here with his lawyers and people represented.
Well, let's go at it this way. You put in your report that Mrs. Durst, meaning Kathleen Durst, had escaped with Michael Burns before, and then you did some investigation. It's the investigation that I want to go to. You investigated whether Kathleen Durst had flown to Florida with Michael Burns.
Michael Burns was a name that was provided to me as somebody I should communicate with, and that was the reason for me to reach out to him.
My question was, you investigated whether Kathleen Durst had flown to Florida with Mr. Burns, didn't you?
May I refer to my
Please
answer?
do.
Thank you.
Page 2, about the middle of it. Specifically where you say in your report, check with Air Florida at Westchester County Airport.
Yes, I'm not sure at that point. I was trying to determine if Kathleen Durst traveled with him. My intention was to communicate with Michael Burns to see if he knew of her whereabouts.
Okay, but did you communicate, did you actually talk to Michael Burns?
I did.
Right. But beyond talking to Michael Burns, you did some independent investigation to determine whether Burns and Kathleen Durst had flown to Florida together, didn't you?
Well, I just can't say that I was trying to determine if Kathleen Durst was on that flight. My goal was to interview Michael Burns to see if he knew of her whereabouts.
Okay. So then when you checked with Air Florida at Westchester County, what was the questions that you asked?
Well, my information was that he was leaving for Florida, and I wanted to see if he was on that flight or where I could make contact with him.
Or whether there was a woman with him?
Well, it's explained to me that it's a 2-for-1 fare at some point. And again, I don't know if I'm thinking, is she with him? Really what I'm thinking, I'm led to him by her circle of friends, and I want to communicate with him.
Okay. Now I want to go back to your stating that Mr. Durst became agitated when you told him that you had information that you'd been treated at a hospital.
Okay.
Understand what the subject? You told Mr. Durst, Bob Durst, that you had information that Kathleen Durst had been treated at the hospital.
Yes.
And he seemed surprised by that and said that he didn't know that.
Yes.
And I think you've even recorded that he said, well, I'm wondering why she didn't ask for our doctors. Something of that nature.
Something of that, yes.
Well, earlier you speculated that well, did you speculate as to what was the reason he seemed to be agitated?
Well, I wouldn't say I speculated. I would tell the court that his demeanor was not the type in which a person who's lost or is missing a wife, his demeanor was not consistent with both cases I investigated prior to that.
But did we establish that you don't know you didn't know anything about Mr. Durst's personality?
That's correct.
And you didn't know how he would react to upsetting news? Whether he would be stoic or show emotion or not?
I'm just speaking from my experience as a police officer.
Okay, speculating, right?
No, I'm not speculating. Just from years of investigating crimes, people act in cases like this, when they lose a loved one or missing somebody, they get very emotional, and some people cry. Many people are just saying, do whatever you can to find this person. And that didn't happen with Mr. Durst.
So, from that, you speculated that there was something significant about the fact that he didn't show emotion until you told him that she'd been treated at a hospital?
To me, my recollection is he was very surprised that I knew about this incident.
Very surprised that it happened, right? Said he didn't know that it happened.
I can't speak for what he knew.
Did he tell you that that was news to him?
If I may refer to this.
Please.
If I may read from the section there.
Yes. Specifically read from the section that you've already read from, which says he denied any knowledge of the incident.
Yes. He denied any knowledge of the incident and was surprised that she did not contact the family physician.
Right. So that's what he said.
That's what he said.
The rest of it was your speculation. So it's speculation on your part.
I would not call it speculation, no.
All right, one other thing I want to go over with you. You received a call from Douglas Durst about a possible burglary at Robert Durst's home in South Salem.
Yes,
And you went there.
yes, I responded to the call.
And sure enough, there was a rear window that had been broken with a rock.
I believe that's what the report indicates.
It's what the report indicates. I just want to know whether you remember it or not.
Well, I remember based on the report, sir.
Do you have any independent recollection?
I don't recall at this time. I believe that what I wrote is what the facts were.
Okay.
It was written the same day.
So do you remember whether it was a small rock or a big rock?
I do not.
Or whether it was a brick or a hammer or whatever?
Hammer's not a rock.
That's true. Did you find the rock?
I do not know. I do not recall.
Okay. Did you go inside?
We may have, but don't recall.
When, if you did you get information that Roberta Najami had broken in? Question is when? Did you already know it when you went there, or did you find out later?
I do not believe that I knew it when I was finding it out.
Okay, so then that means you did find that out.
That was reported somehow, somewhere, at a subsequent time.
Okay. Do you remember how you found it out?
I do not. I can't state how I found out.
Roberta Najami confessed it to you. In other words, did she tell you that she done that?
I don't believe that she told me that.
Do you believe she told someone else that?
Could have, I don't know.
Okay. Now, tell us if you recall about how long you were in Mr. Durst's house, taking the report from him, asking him questions, looking around at whatever you looked around. How long were you in the house?
May I refer to the various documents?
Sure, if it's in there, I don't think it is.
No, but I'm just looking at the timeline.
Okay.
So I report that we interviewed him at his residence at 11:40 p.m. My closing blotted entry for the day, which is the next morning at 1 a.m., is 1 a.m. Is my closing blottery for my duty for the day. So it's in between that period, 11:40. I wouldn't say it ended at 1. I doubt it did. It's probably midnight, and then I'm, preparing notes.
Okay, so the 11:40 entry in the blotter, was that made at 11:40?
No, sir. My end of day activity is reported at 1 a.m. the following morning. What I'm saying is, I have in my notes, there's a statement that we interviewed him at his residence at 11:40. Basically, we got to the residence at 11:40 p.m.
How far is the residence from the office where you kept the blotter?
Well, blotters are kept in the two stations that we're talking about, Lewisboro and Somers. It looks like I responded from Somers, the Somers barracks that evening. So the distance would be 12 miles, 15 miles maybe from the barracks to Mr. Durst's residence.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put together the timeline. If you go there and interview him at 11:40, about 1 something, you're making an entry. Louder, that's, of course, that's an hour and 20 minutes plus. Some of that would have been travel back and forth.
Some would be travel, some would be consumed with the time that I wrote this particular document.
Okay, so you're in his house by invitation, right?
Your Honor, when he says this particular document, he was pointing to something on the desk. I don't know which one he was pointing to.
I'm sorry, it is the
People's what? What's on the bottom?
People's 52.
Thank you.
That's the February 6th report.
Yes,
That's not the blotter.
that's not the blotter.
Did you refer to the blotter?
Well, yes, but, I'm sorry, People's 51.
And does the blotter help you?
Well, the blotter again is when I make my closing entry for the day, 1 a.m. on February 6th.
Well, no, I'm really asking you about the beginning entry. There's an entry at 1 a.m. on the 6th, but there's also an entry before that on the 5th, isn't there? 10 p.m., entry number 1375.
Yes, again, People's 51, 10:10 p.m. I think we read this into the record earlier, sir.
Yes, sir. That's the beginning of it, right?
That's when he calls.
Okay, so 10:10 is when he called, not 11:40.
No, sir, no, don't be mistaken. I arrived at his house at 11:40.
Okay. All right, so you're there by invitation.
He called us.
So yes, you're there by invitation.
Yes,
You're in his home. Let's look at what you knew as far as investigation was concerned at that time. You talked to the, I'll just talk about it as your work on the case. I don't mean to, but were you investigating?
I responded to a call. If you want to use the word investigate, I'm investigating a missing person's case.
Okay, so in your investigation, as you, let's look at what you knew by the time you went to Mr. Durst's house. Okay. You talked to Mr. McCormack, her brother, who was very concerned, and her sister, who was Mary Hughes, was very concerned.
Yes.
You knew that Mr. Durst had been interviewed, at least, by Detective Struck in the yard.
Yes.
Now, you put all this together in your mind and say, gosh, this is a great opportunity to see what I can see when I go to the home.
I think I'm trying to determine what happened here.
Sure.
That's first and foremost.
Sure. And wasn't it a great opportunity without having to apply for a search warrant to go to the home?
I did go to the home, yes.
And wasn't that a great opportunity?
It's an opportunity to interview Mr. Durst.
And to look around his home at his invitation.
Well, he didn't invite us to look around his home. He called us to follow up on the missing person complaint after he appeared at the NYPD.
Have you ever conducted a search by consent?
Probably have.
In how many years as a police officer?
In 31 years.
In 31 years as a police officer, can you estimate for us how many times you have conducted a search by consent? That is, by getting the person through Trpr or whatever to consent to search of a home or car. Have you ever done that?
I'm sure I have. Not by trick.
Well, by guys. Although, so now you have Robert Durst inviting you into his home. Did you consider saying, well, Mr. Durst, will you consent to a search of your home?
I don't know if we considered that at that point. I believe we had not fully determined the circumstances of this missing person case.
Did you ask him, may I look around?
I'm not sure we had that conversation.
If you don't remember, or you didn't have that conversation,
I don't recall.
wouldn't it have been a good idea?
I don't recall if we had that conversation.
I hear you, but wouldn't it have been a good idea? So, with what you knew then, wouldn't it have been a good idea to ask for consent?
I'm not sure we entertained that thought. We just wanted to find Kathleen Durst.
Okay,
And he sent us in a direction, and we followed that direction.
but my question really goes to this golden opportunity that you had, that Mr. Durst's invitation to come into his home, and maybe you could look around and do a search. That didn't occur to you at all?
I'm just working off my recollection here, but I think we were going to have our facts before we executed a search.
Well, certainly you would have to have facts to present to a judge to get a search warrant based on probable cause. You knew that. That's Cop 101.
Yes.
And you didn't have those facts, right?
I'm trying to develop information based on the complaint to determine their whereabouts.
But you certainly had suspicions, didn't you?
People made statements that I took into consideration when I interviewed him.
Right. And so with those suspicions being handed on a silver platter, the opportunity to get inside the home, did you just really not consider, occur to you at all to ask for a consensual search?
I might have entertained the thought, but that was not on the table at that time.
You would have put it into...
All right, thank you for pausing, Mr. Balian. It is time for our afternoon recess. Let's take 10 minutes. I guess we do 50. 3:15, I think, is fine. And we'll resume 3:15 sharp. Do not discuss the case. Do not make your mind up about any issue, or do not make your mind up about the verdict until you've discussed the case with the other jurors during deliberations. We'll see you at 3:15.